Action.
Oh no, Abby, are you rolling this whole time?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
I mean, I don't have anyone to do the cameras. Well, welcome folks to another episode of Cinema Double Shot, where we talk about movies and all the fun things happening in the world. Maybe not the latter thing. I'm Wallys McKelvey. I'm a journalist and filmmaker. And for this episode, 2 episodes in a row, I've got my partner, Josh.
The Cheshire Cat! No.
I'm pretty sure that peaked.
Oh no! There's going to be a cut here.
Well, today we're going to talk about movie award shows. And I guess award shows in general, right? Because there's more than just the Oscars. There's the Golden Globes, the Emmys, the
BAFTAs.
The BAFTAs. You've got, oh, I heard a buzz. You didn't turn off your phone.
I thought I did.
That's okay. What do you remember about the very first award show that you watched as a kid?
It was the one where Titanic won a bunch of stuff. Because that's when I started the tradition of going over to my grandparents' house, and my grandmother and I would have Oscar parties, which we continued up until about 2021, and then we had to stop because her health wasn't getting so great. But I remember it would be a tradition. We would always put on the red carpet first, and we would judge people's outfits like old queens, and it was a lot of fun. And then we'd have our lists, and we'd go through the ones that we liked and the ones that we saw, and then we would watch it and get excited whenever there'd be somebody from old Hollywood on the screen. We were really excited the year that Titanic came out because we were bonding over Gloria Stuart being at the Oscars, which was so cool.
Did your grandmother remember seeing Gloria Stuart on the big screen?
I believe so, yeah. So, yeah, because we used to talk about old movies all the time. So it was kind of a mix. It was neat that it was with my grandmother because it was like this mix of, in a way, old Hollywood and new Hollywood discussion happening while we're watching the awards. So it was really cool. And yeah, like I said, up until about 2021, we kept that tradition going. As a matter of fact, the last one I did with my grandmother, it was me, my grandmother, and Matt. My friend Matt, who is also like a weird movie buff, but it was just random that he was just there with us. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. How about you?
So I think the first one that I remember, I'm sure I was there in the room for other ones, but the very first year that I remember watching the Oscars was the year that Jurassic Park came out.
Ooh.
And it actually speaks to my larger relationship with awards, because if you remember, Jurassic Park, like I looked this up, and Jurassic Park won 3 awards, the 3 that it was up for. Visual effects, sound effects, and sound, which back then there was a distinction between those 2 categories, even though there tends to be a fair amount of overlap. But I don't want to nerd out over that. We don't have the time. But it wasn't nominated for Best Picture. And I distinctly remember being like sitting at the foot of my parents' bed being like, wait, what gives? I don't think I said what gives. But why is Jurassic Park not up for it? Mm-hmm. And of course, this was the year that Steven Spielberg was up for 2 movies. Like he had 2 big movies that year. Can you guess the other one?
Was it Schindler's List?
It was.
Yeah. Well, that's a little tough.
Yeah. Well, and he swept a lot of the awards that Schindler's List was up for. He won for director for Schindler's List.
Rightfully so, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't really argue with that. Although, in terms of myself personally, I think Jurassic Park is still in the pantheon, where Schindler's List is something I only saw once or twice. It's not the kind of movie you revisit every year.
No. No.
But I distinctly remember that year and looking for Jurassic Park and not seeing it.
Oh.
And that was my first, because like many other people from my generation, I was obsessed with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, I remember Titanic. I think we just got in the habit. We watched it every year in my household. And my favorite segments of the award shows were always the technical ones where you got to see behind the scenes, when they would show the sketches for the costume design, the sketches for production design. In editing, they would show you like where the cuts were made. And the Oscar telecasts, like, you can say a lot of things about them. They tend to drag on, and some years they just stuff the Oscar telecast with things that are not necessary. But my favorite parts have always been the years when they get a little wonky with it.
Yeah. Well, I with the showing things like behind the scenes and all that stuff, I like that kind of stuff. I feel like that's when they're the most effective, when they make it about movies and less about the shtick. Because I could hear, some of the documentaries I watch are like 5 hours long. I could sit through
6 hours about 90s horror movies.
You can sit through an award show if it is like aggressively about the movies.
Yeah. What's the name of that documentary?
Oh, In Search of Darkness. By the way,
shout out to In Search of Darkness.
I'm in it for like 3 seconds, but
Josh makes an appearance in the most recent In Search of Darkness 6-hour epic.
It's so good
because they put a call out for people to like record themselves. I helped record your little.
You did.
I directed you.
You did. But check it out when it's widely available, especially if you like to watch long documentaries and absorb information about filmmaking.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, and you might notice we've got like journals and papers in front of us. Because as part of our discussion today, we're going to share our own 2024 Film Awards.
Woo!
So I don't know about you, but I remember growing up, and partially this explains my contrarian personality, going back to that first year when I was like, what gives? Jurassic Park isn't here. I kind of set up this relationship, a kind of a respect, a love, but also a kind of a questioning mentality when it comes to these awards. From the very first award show I can remember, I was questioning, well, why didn't they give it to this person? Why isn't this person here? And every year it was, part of the fun was predicting, but also like imagining, well, what would I have given this award to instead of the Oscars, instead of the fuddy-duddies, which historically have been mostly white, mostly men, mostly people 50 years and older, although that's changed. Mostly straight, that's true, except for the closeted queens. We won't name you after death, but they were out there. And part of the fun was like predicting and making my own, right?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, when did you start doing this? But you already kind of went into that. But like, what year did you start doing this?
Yeah, well, so I remember, when I was a really little kid, so like probably around the time of the Titanic Oscars. My mom, because we watched Titanic in theaters together twice.
Oh my God.
I was 10 years old. I'm not sure Titanic was appropriate for a 10-year-old to be watching, Kate Winslet slap her sweaty hand against a Model T window.
Oh, I forgot about that part. I was like, it's not that bad. And then you said that, and I'm like, oopsie daisy. No, never mind.
I got to see a lot of movies that were probably not quite age appropriate. But one of the things that year, because it was in the mix of stuff I was fascinated with as a kid. There was like archaeology and paleontology. There was architecture. I was obsessed with Frank Lloyd Wright. And there was movies. From the time I was a little kid, I was obsessed with movies. And the year of the Titanic win, she got the Entertainment Weekly from around that time, and it had the full roster, and it encouraged you to like check things that you thought would win or should, and like I think it left like a little bar for what should win.
Yeah.
And not only did I fill that out, but I remember that year I created my own award show.
Nice.
Now I had only seen like maybe 6 like in-release movies that year.
How many of them were animated?
Right? Well, actually, I remember some of the other ones were the Clint Eastwood movie that came out that year, Absolute Power.
Did you watch that when you were 10?
I did.
Oh my God.
I watched that in the theater. With, again, my parents, you can question their judgment somewhat, but they took me to a lot of like, oh, there's a lot of sex in this movie. Oh, it's a political conspiracy. People are getting shot dead.
Is that the year that... When did Titanic come out?
That was I'm pretty sure Absolute Power was 97, and that was the same year Titanic came out.
When did the remake of Manchurian Candidate come out? You just said political.
Oh, that was like 2004.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
That was a few years later.
All right, sorry.
But I remember doing that kind of stuff. And then the Wallys, which are like more my kind of full-fledged, and every year they get a little bigger, that started in college.
Okay.
So I continued this trajectory, and I remember one of my good friends in undergrad was like, I went off on one of my tangents about how the Oscars that year didn't really reflect the depth and breadth of what was actually good in cinema that year. I believe this was the year that Crash won, and got nominated for a slew of things, which, hot take, I actually respect Crash. I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. It's a flawed movie, but
I had to watch it in sociology class, so I have some like biases against it.
Yeah.
But because it was like, oh, okay.
I got to see a sneak preview of Crash before it got wide release in college as part of one of my, I think it was freshman orientation. We had to watch Crash for freshman orientation.
Very similar.
And I remember being really harumphy when the nominations came out the following January, and it got a bunch of nominations. I was like, okay, I could see a couple of these, but like, this is not a masterpiece, this movie. Like, it wasn't even my favorite movie of that year. And one of my friends suggested, well, put up or shut up. If you don't like the Oscar nominations, why don't you just come up with your own? And so that was how the Wallys were born. It started out with me just going through all the movies I'd seen that year, creating my own categories, giving my own nominations and the winners, and I just shared it among my circle of friends in college. And then it just became an annual thing after that, where some years I've done more for it. Like, there were a few years in the 2010s when I actually had like a full dinner party and I invited people over, and
we should do that again. That would be fun.
We watched the Oscars, and on the commercial breaks, I announced the Wallys. Right? And it was kind of, it was kind of corny, but it was really just an excuse to get friends together. And the Wallys were like part of the larger night, right?
Yeah.
And then I started publishing them on a blog in around the same time.
Which I found.
Yeah.
When we started dating. Anyways.
And then when, as a journalist, actually, I mean, in my journalism life, I cover a lot of hardcore stuff like political corruption, environmental issues, public health. Like, I've always been an investigative reporter, at least for the last decade. So I covered a lot of intense stuff. But my last job, my boss, Paul, encouraged me because he knew I was obsessed with movies, and he knew I did this kind of stuff. Was like, yeah, why don't you just put your stuff together and publish it? And so my end of year film lists and even I think the one year even my awards were published by the newspaper.
Nice. So
it's kind of ebbed and flowed, but it's been a constant. And now this is the 20th year I've done the Wallys. I don't know how it got to this
almost
point.
Half your life.
Yeah, but once you start a habit and it sticks, you just keep going.
Nice.
So this is your first year putting together your own awards.
A list of anything. I just sat and, because none of the stuff that I really like ever gets nominated. That's not true. But it is very rare that we'll say genre films tend to get nominations because they're a different kind of film. So like Jurassic Park, I would argue, like it's a genre film, but it's got clout. Is that what I want to say? Maybe that it's like
it's got a sheen of prestige to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like some of my favorite movies of this year, you know, they were well made and have great performances in them, I think. But they're considered like trash, you know. So, but it gets interesting this year. But I won't get into that.
Yeah, I mean there are a few like actual horror movies that are up for consideration this year.
Like for like legit, and not even just, I don't want to say legit. Ours is legit too.
All of them are legit.
All of them are legit. But like the prestige ones even have some of these on their list, which is kind of nice, I guess. Where was I going with this? Oh, I haven't done this, so I had to actually look at what you do and be like, okay. Well, and I know you said that I could be flexible and like add my own categories of things, but I really like how you broke it down. It actually makes a lot of sense. I got for those watching and listening, for some context, Wallace sent me his entire roster and how he breaks it down with percentages and everything like that for the Wallys. And I pretty much just modeled mine off of that because it's a good system and it worked. So mine are pretty much the same. Not the same nominations, but the same
Yours
structure.
are a bit different. I got a sneak peek.
And yeah, mine are very weird.
Yeah. But that's the fun of the exercise is you get to your year-end lists and your awards reflect in many ways your own personality.
Yes, and I just realized. Oh, sorry. Continue.
I certainly will make an argument that mine are the best, but as with most things in art, there's always a certain kind of absurdity to like a competition where you pit one movie against another, one painting against another. There's always just like, that's not really the point. The way that I reconcile it is, you know, we are helping in some small way to advance the conversation around these in this case a movie. And in many ways, I think the Academy Awards do the same thing. Now, the Oscars are a little different because they started out as basically the movie industry in 1927 kind of patting themselves on the back. And it started out as like just like a dinner in a small theater, and they actually had the awards were pretty much fixed. Mm-hmm. You know, the big studios kind of did their own behind the scenes horse racing and negotiations over who would get nominated and who would win. And they tried to like kind of divvy them out fairly based on the size of those studios and their clout. And in many ways, the Oscars are still that way, have continued to be that way for decades. Not so much that they're quote unquote fixed, but the people who can afford to fund marketing campaigns, because this is big business, lots of money are spent marketing movies specifically for the Oscars. And the folks who spend the most money, historically the Weinstein brothers, Harvey Weinstein, who, we're not even going to go there with him, but that's what he was known for. He created these independent companies, and he put a lot of money into specifically campaigning for his small indie movies to be up for awards consideration. And that's why, for example, Shakespeare in Love won versus Steven Spielberg's his World War II epic in '98. Like, that was the famous upset win because so much money was poured into that Oscar campaign. Anyway, I feel like I'm straying off the subject.
No, that's
here.
all right. This is important history, Wallace. You are educating the youngins. I'm fascinated by the history of the Oscars, so I appreciate the context to why it is that we then do this.
Why we do it.
Well, why you've been doing it for a long time, and I have done it for this challenge.
Yeah. And when you have a system like that where it's a lot of insiders and there's a lot of like tipping the scales in favor of one person or another, really what that means is a lot of the incumbents have the advantage in the Oscar race. And not just the Oscars, it's all part of, like, there's a whole season, quote unquote, of awards that lead up to the Oscars. And a lot of attention goes into all of those things along the way. The BAFTAs, the Golden Globes.
Like, so-and-so got this. That means, because they got this, this makes them even more likely to get an Oscar. It's all built up to,
And then you also, the awards that I find most meaningful today, the ones that I like to follow still, are the union or guild awards. So every craft that goes into making a movie, they have their own quote unquote guild, basically a union that represents members of that guild. They come out with their awards, and they're part of this season each year as well. The one thing I notice is that the guilds tend to be, because they are voted on by their peers, as opposed to folks who might be retired, haven't really been in the game for that long. Like, it's a much smaller group. You tend to get more eccentric nominations, or the films that are honored tend to be, it's more closely aligned to their technical achievement, as opposed to their ability to politic and network and all that.
You put out all the money and all that jazz. Yeah.
So like the Cinematographers Guild, the people who actually, are in charge of lighting and camera work, they have their awards each year. The SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, they have their awards each year. The editors have their award. The sound engineers have their award. And you get some interesting stuff there. And then, of course, the most prestigious award of all, the Wallys,
correct,
comes out every year, and everyone's just waited with bated breath to see what I come up with.
Oh, yes. I mean, I am. I still think you should have a party. I think that would be fun. So let's talk about that off air.
We can.
All right, excellent. And hang on for just a moment. I need to write something down while I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
So can I don't know.
We'll
cut.
Movie magic.
We're good.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
And we're back, folks.
And we're back, A Dinosaur Story, which came out around the same time that Jurassic Park did, because Steven Spielberg had a thing for dinosaurs. And didn't he produce Land Before Time also?
Yeah, Steven Spielberg produced a bunch of dinosaur-related content around the same time. We're back. A Dinosaur Story is bananas.
I love that movie, and it's such a weird cast. Like, Walter Cronkite and Julia Child are in that movie. Like, what? It's so weird. Anyway.
I feel like we should talk a little bit about how we created our list.
All right, you go.
And some of the rules.
Yeah, well, do you want to start by saying what your categories are?
I'm not going to include every category, because at last check, I think I have 20 or so.
Oh.
That's a lot.
That is overwhelming.
So in this video, I'm not going to go through every category that I have. But you can click the link to my blog in the description of this video on YouTube, or on in the description of the episode in the podcast description, to actually see my full list in all of its glory.
I can't wait. You will not be seeing mine because I don't publish mine. This is my first time ever doing it. But I can't wait to read your blog. Are you going to put extra thoughts in yours?
No.
Okay.
It's just going to be a list, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to put pressure on you. I was just
you're fine. But the biggest quote unquote controversy in my own list is I stick very dedicatedly to the calendar year. If you notice, if you follow the Oscars at all, very often a bunch of the top candidates for the Oscars were not released in the year that they are honoring. Because of the nature of that marketing campaign that I talked about, a lot of the distribution companies, the major studios, they wait until after the awards season has begun to begin kind of trickling out their movies. So the way the Oscars work is they do have a requirement. You have to play, I believe it's one weekend in Los Angeles before the end of the year in order to be eligible for that year's Oscars. A lot of major studios game that system because they know they're going to spend a lot of money on the campaign for the awards, and they piggyback off of that money with the idea is they're going to get nominations, and once they're nominated, once there's wider public interest in their movie, that's when they release their movie across the country. So often they'll wait until January, February, even March to actually release these films, even though they're technically 2024 films.
Well, it's smart.
It is smart.
It's smart.
I don't blame studios for doing that because you figure you're going to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, marketing your movie to the Oscars. Why would you spend that money twice, which in essence is what you have to do if you release a movie earlier in the year? That's also in part why the awards that you see, the Oscars, the Golden Globes, and so forth, they tend to have a bias for movies that were released later in the year. You often don't see movies that were released in January, April, even the summer, up for major awards. You certainly do. There's always a bunch that are, but there is a recency bias, and the studios know that, and so they tend not to release their movies until the last quarter of the year or even further out. And I don't know. This is a hill that I die on consistently when it comes to my own awards, and it's probably incredibly boring for people to listen to this. But I really believe in, if these are the awards for 2024, I am only going to put movies that were available to the average person in 2024. So, for example, The Last Showgirl, which I saw like a couple nights ago. This is the middle of January. We saw it in the theater a couple nights ago. This is its first week in wide release. And that, to me, is a 2025 movie. Has great performances in it by Pamela Anderson and Jamie Lee Curtis and a bunch of other people. But you're not going to see them in my awards because that's a 2025 film as far as I'm concerned. Even though it's possible some of those folks might be up for Oscars when the nominations are announced on January 23rd.
Yeah. And with your rule, I'm a little... So, there's part of it, if it was released early enough, if it had I don't want to even get into my reasoning for it, but similarly, I'm not going to include Last Showgirl because it wasn't even available until January for the average person.
Yeah.
That I feel like is fair because there was no way that we were going to get out to LA, especially not right now, to go see.
Yeah.
To go see.
Well, the wildfires delayed even the announcement of the awards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's no way that came out for everybody in January, and that is 2025. But it was very good. I love that movie. It will definitely be on my second annual Snoddys. I know this already.
Josh, you're calling your awards
the
I
didn't
Snoddys.
even say which one. I forgot to say what mine were called. Yes. So
why the Snoddys?
it's a long story that I'm going to try to truncate very much so. When I was living in a house with my jackass best friend, Hal, he hacked into my computer while I was away in the shower and changed my last name on Facebook to Snodgrass because he thought it was funny because it was a funny last name that he had heard. And Facebook would not let me change it back because you have to wait 6 months before you can change it. So for a while I became Josh Snodgrass on social media, and then this was around the time I started working at the Renaissance Fair. and it was picked up by all the fair. You have a fair name when you work at fair, and Snodgrass became my fair name, and then everybody called me Snoddy. So that is how it was like, oh, it's got a little E sound. It's got the same, cadence to it. So I will call mine the Snoddys. That was a long story. Sorry about that.
Well, I just went on. I just had a soliloquy about movie release dates. So,
So they're called Snoddys, and it's all Hal's fault. We'll say that.
okay, all right. You're gonna have to send this to Hal.
I will.
In
yes.
his honor.
Yes. But yeah, I picked up the same categories that you did, and I'm going by your rules pretty much. I decided to steer away from controversy. That if there was something, that wasn't quite like as close as some of those things, that I could possibly pick instead, I would do that. But there are a couple where I've like teetered the line of your rules and the rules of the average person, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and for several years, I didn't. If you go back into my archives, you could go on my blog and see some of the previous years. There definitely were years when I made an exemption, like to that rule. But lately, I don't know. A man's got to have a code, and that's my code.
And that is absolutely fine. It worked just fine for me, and it works fine for you.
I don't yuck anyone else's yum.
Correct.
However you want to do it is fine with me. This is just the system that keeps my sanity.
Excellent. Well, we have rules. Mm-hmm. So that's the only rule.
That's kind of the only rule.
Our...
I like to spread my awards around a bit to have a greater variety of winners as well. Right. I think that's a good principle just in life because, as I said, there are so many great movies. You don't need to concentrate all of your energy and attention on one of them the way the Oscars do sometimes, where movies will sweep almost all the categories. And you're like, wait, this movie didn't deserve all of these. So, that's more of a guiding principle as opposed to a rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. Do you want to list all of your categories, or are you just going to
let's just start.
We're just going to start?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I should probably say for mine, particularly what I decided to do was I decided to give special attention to genre films. So there's going to be some in my list that might not even come up in any awards aside from Fangoria Chainsaw Awards.
Well, it also it speaks to your personal preferences.
My personal tastes. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm like, there are a bunch of really beautiful, good movies that I saw this year that would be probably better be considered as like the best, which I haven't even mentioned in mine. But it is because I tried to balance mine between what are some of these like actually, prestige good movies, and then which are some that like, this just made me smile this year.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Well, without further ado, let's just do it.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
All right. So, what category are we starting off with?
We're going to start
McKelvey.
Similar to the Oscars. We're going to start with the Craft Awards.
Excellent.
And as I said, I'm not going to go through all of them. That's no disrespect to the sound editors, to the composers, to the production designers, the hair and makeup teams. A lot of work goes into making a movie, and believe it or not, I have categories for most of them. But we're not going to go through all of them here. Check them out on my blog. It'll be up in the same time as the video and the podcast. But we're going to start with visual effects.
Yes.
And this is a great place to honor movies that like are more mainstream movies, because honestly, that's where you see some of the biggest budgets for visual effects come in these like summer blockbuster movies. Although I have a bit of a curveball coming with the one that I awarded Best Visual Effects this year for the Wallys. So my nominations are Alien Romulus, the latest in the Alien franchise, which is really a surprisingly good and unexpected film. They took a franchise that has gotten a little musty lately and moved it in a new direction. Dune Part 2, Godzilla -1, the Japanese latest film in that franchise.
So good.
The Substance, which is Coralie Fargeat's really wonderful body horror satire that you're going to hear a lot more about in the next categories. And my winner for this year is Hundreds of Beavers.
Yeah!
Mike Cheslick's really low-budget independent film set in the northern tier of America by the Canadian border about a fur trapper and fur trappers and apple orchards, and it is very reminiscent of early Hollywood films of, you know, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. And what I love most, I mean, I love many things about Hundreds of Beavers, don't get me wrong, but one of the things that I really found charming is it had a really tiny cast and crew. When it came to filming, they actually filmed out in the tundra, basically, in the middle of winter, with a small skeleton crew of like 6 people, and a Panasonic GH5, which is the camera I'm currently recording this on. And the visual effects were all done by a small team, led by the director. They did as much as they could using their really basic software, and then they augmented it with, you know, additional stuff. But the visual effects are really quite impressive. There's almost not a single frame of this film that does not have some kind of visual effect, whether it's practical or done on the computer. And they managed to achieve all of this look, the really authentic look of a 19-teens comedic film. They achieved it all on like a bare bones budget. And I love that. I absolutely love that. The degree of difficulty, it may not look as polished as the special effects in Dune Part 2, but the level of difficulty involved is what makes this really stand out for me.
I agree. That movie is like, it's live action cartoon.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I love the mix of practical and digital effects because it is so seamless in that film. So I snaps for that.
Yeah. What's yours?
So for my best visual effects, believe it or not, I tried to focus a little bit on practical effects because those are my very favorite, and I love watching it. I love seeing the seams and things. My nominations are, I have a couple that were on yours. Hundreds of Beavers was in fact nominated. The Substance was also nominated. And then here are 3. One of them is Beetlejuice, the Tim Burton's sequel to the Beetlejuice films that really combines stop motion animation, practical effects, and a little bit of CGI, which was kind of cool. In a Violent Nature, the Canadian horror slasher film.
Buckets of blood in that
one. And so many cool kills in that movie. And then another film that's not going to get mentioned on anything else, which is my winner, is a film called Destroy All Neighbors, which is a gonzo horror film that was released by Shudder, directed by Josh Forbes. And the practical effects in this movie are absolutely bonkers. It is like a splatter film, but there's makeup designs that are great. It reminds me of the kind of movies that I used to stay up late and watch when I wasn't supposed to be. And it's goopy and disgusting and
goopy.
It's
a very goopy film.
And the makeup job they did on Alex Winter is so fun. He plays this older, like, grotesque looking man, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. And yeah, that's mine.
Yeah. Well, and that's another kind of low budget film.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I suspect its budget is a bit higher than Hundreds of Beavers, but it is still solidly an independent film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, and also a surprise for me because I put it on thinking, oh, this is going to be entertaining, and then it ended up being one of my favorite movies this last year because just of how well made it was. So, yeah.
Cool. We're going to skip past a lot of the other technical categories into best editing. And a note about editing, because I'm a filmmaker myself, and I spend a lot of time sitting in my chair. We're in my studio right now recording this, hunched over, editing my films myself. I think the best editing is typically films where you don't notice that they've been edited. You don't notice the cuts. And really that makes this a very difficult category to nail down and give nominations for, because you're awarding somebody for being able to create something that ideally you don't notice. Now, I do notice because I sit hunched behind my desk editing a lot, and I've probably got a little really bad posture because of it. But I like to rewatch films and sometimes watch them specifically to see, oh, how did they do that? What were the individual shots that composed this scene, and how do they manipulate my emotions going through it? So the films that I think did this the best, and a lot of this is like, again, degree of difficulty. Sean Baker's Anora, which he actually edited himself. You'll hear Anora again. Mike Cheslick from Hundreds of Beavers. The editing in that film is, on one hand, the visuals are very in your face and obvious, but the actual editing is seamless. He really did a good job with Hundreds of Beavers. Challengers, the Luca Guadagnino film, editor is Marco Costa. The Zone of Interest, the Jonathan Glazer film, edited by Paul Watts. And then my winner is The Substance, which director Coralie Fargeat actually worked on an editing team behind that film with, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the names, but she had 3 editors, including the director, who created, on one hand, that film breaks my rule that I just said. Like, if you're a filmmaker, you definitely notice the editing in The Substance. However, that is part of the point of that film.
Yes.
It is making a comment on consumer culture and Hollywood by even just the way it's edited. And it switches gears really seamlessly as you go along. It is arguably more artificial in the beginning of the film, when it's commenting on the Hollywood culture and the way we discard people and the way we objectify people, especially women, in Hollywood. And then as the movie drifts into another genre, the editing becomes a lot less, you see the seams less, and that's part of the point, because the main character is, I don't want to spoil it, but the main character is going through a transformation. And the editing, the tempo of the film transforms as the main character transforms. It is just delightful. I love the editing in The Substance.
Well, you've said it all.
I'm sorry.
No, that is okay. This makes it easy, and we can go a little. We can move through things. Believe it or not, for my best editing, all of my nominations were the same, with the exception of one.
Oh.
Because I did not see Zone of Interest. But I did nominate Alex Jacobs for In a Violent Nature, which also, that movie is so interesting because you follow the character, the killer throughout the film, and it's just, you're going through his life. Did an incredible job with that film. But my winner was also The Substance, and for all of those reasons that you just mentioned, because it doesn't just edit to make you not think about it. It does something kind of, I'm going to be like cliche, and say Brechtian with the editing style, where it is constantly reminding you that you are watching a film, but that is okay.
Yeah. Well, and editing, I think, is an underrated art form in and of itself, because a movie is different at different stages of its creation. You know, there's the movie that is written down in a script. It becomes a much different movie when a director is on set creating it. And then finally, it becomes a much different film again when it gets to the editor. Now some directors are also editors, and some directors are very strict. They have final cut. They're very hands-on with their editors, even if they don't get an editing credit. And very strict about, oh, this is my vision, and you're going to stick to it. But even in those cases, even like Scorsese, who is constantly giving flowers to his regular editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, like a good editor transforms the material that's been recorded. And I guarantee you the films that we've just identified, the edit transformed those films and really is integral to making those films what they are. It's literally piecing together and creating something that is in front of the audience at the end. It's not quite the final step, but it's an important step in that process. Cinematography. Why don't you take this one?
Cinematography.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, I'm going to have you start because you
want me to explain it?
Yes, please. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry.
So cinematography is similar to editing. It can mean a couple different things because depending on the director and the type of movie and the environment in which it was made, cinematography can encompass a bunch of different stuff. But what it's most commonly referring to is the lighting scheme. You know, so how a scene is lit, and the way that the lighting can impact the emotions of the audience. But it can include camera movement. It could also include the decision not to move the camera at all. It can also include the way that a film is, the colors of the film. Very often cinematographers will work intimately with other departments, costume, production design, the director, and in shaping the look of the film. And then once the film is actually recorded on camera, they often interface with color correction, other people, they collaborate to change the look of the film. A great example of this is Steven Soderbergh's Traffic, the film Traffic, because it has a very heavy-handed is not quite the right word for it, but there are distinctive looks, and that is achieved through combination of cinematography and color correction. Some of the characters, the look of the film is heavily blue. Other characters, it's heavily yellow, bordering on orange. And the cinematographer, in concert with these other people, really is in charge of the look and the feel of a film in a way that is really important. And they tend to be more toward the beginning of the filming process. That's where they leave their mark, as opposed to the end where an editor is more likely to leave their mark.
See, that's why I had you do the intro. That's why I had you start with it, because you're so eloquent at explaining these things. I love it.
Your crash course in cinematography.
There we go. You're getting two things here. You're getting the Wallys, and you are. I appreciate it because as a filmmaker, somebody creating awards like this, you can break down the just
the why.
The why, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what were your favorite films cinematographically?
All right. So for the films that I have nominated, I have challengers. Love Lies Bleeding, In a Violent Nature. You see a theme here. I did put Nosferatu on this list because it did look gorgeous.
Nosferatu is a gorgeous film.
It is a gorgeous movie.
Yeah.
But Eric KU won for I saw the TV Glow for mine. Just because that movie, there's a lot. Very similar to what you were saying with editing for The Substance. How do I word this? That film has so many different looks, but they are cohesive to create the narrative of this character who is exploring their personality, their feelings, their inner life. So you have moments of that movie where it perfectly recreates the look of like a Monster of the Week like show in the 90s. But then there are other moments where it is genuinely like a heartfelt, warm, intimate scene between the two leads. And then it even goes into horror territory with the way that it is lit, the way that it is, like, by the time you get to the end of that movie, it is like high-octane nightmare fuel. So it's just, there's so much going on in that movie, but it all, you think it shouldn't work together, and it all works together to create this narrative of this person who is literally trying to find themselves while simultaneously losing themselves. And I think that movie looks brilliant. It looks wonderful. Anyway.
Yes. I love that film, and I love the cinematography, and it is among my nominees for cinematography from last year. I think you said it well.
Cool.
It really perfectly balances the conflicting and contradictory feelings of a person discovering themselves, as the protagonist does, as we follow them as we follow this protagonist from high school or it's actually middle school, isn't it?
It starts
from middle
early,
school like into middle age. And the cinematography does a lot of that work. So for me, in addition to Eric KU, I saw the TV Glow. My nominees are Dinh Du Hung. He's a Vietnamese cinematographer behind Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell. Helene Louvart from the French film La Chimera. And Lucas Zal, the cinematographer of The Zone of Interest. The person who won my award, who was nominated by you, is Sayambu Mukdipram. He is a Thai cinematographer who's best known for his collaborations with a Thai director. Apichapong Joe is his Americanized name, but we're Sathuku. He has lensed some of the best films by that director, and lately he's been collaborating with Luca Guadagnino. The work that he did for Challengers this year is just absolutely stunning, and it speaks to the collaborative nature that I talked about when you talk about cinematography, because Challengers, there's a really fabulous sequence in which the camera moves across this tennis court and picks up the perspective of the tennis ball while it's in flight. And the way that they achieve that, it's a combination of set design, real location, computer-generated effects, lighting, camera motion. They had to create a rig especially for that scene.
Wow, I did not know that.
And that's just one scene. This film is full of just gorgeous problem solving. The amount of problems that needed to be solved in order to create these images, it's really staggering, and an incredible feat of cinematography. I loved it. I was bowled over by that film. And it's all in service of a story. These characters and these emotions. So, yeah.
You said that very well too, and that was seeing that in the cinema was quite the experience.
Yeah, it's a really visceral film that puts you right
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, no shade at all to the screenwriters. We're going to skip past screenwriting as well, as much as that's an important piece of filmmaking. In part because many of the filmmakers, many of my nominees for scriptwriting this year are also the directors. So I guess that's my justification for skipping past it, at least for the podcast and the video.
Right.
But you can read that category.
Where at?
On the blog.
And how can we find the blog?
You can click the link in the description on YouTube and on the podcast.
Woo!
We're moving forward to breakthrough performance. And how do we decide what is a breakthrough performance?
Well, I think we both have different definitions of it, I think. It was what we discovered, yes? So do you want to go with what you say, and then I will go with what I say?
I think this is one of those categories that's kind of hard to define what is a breakthrough. I've certainly seen other awards bodies, and the Oscars, they don't have this category. I think it's important to recognize people who are early in their career when they have a role that really is the first time you notice them. It's the first really great achievement before, as they're on the journey to becoming who they are as a performer. It's a way to recognize performances that would ordinarily not get recognized by an awards body, especially for people who are earlier in their career. And when I say early, that's not necessarily a comment on age either, because even in my category, at least one of these folks, I believe he's like 40 or in his 40s. But it's a way of recognizing people who do something kind of above and beyond the previous stage that they were in, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But of course, it's a very personal thing too, because the people that I recognize in my nominations, all of them have been working for years, if not decades. They've been around. This is just the first year when I really stood up and took notice of their work.
And to be honest, that's actually, our definitions aren't that much different.
Yeah. What's different is how personal it is.
Yes, I was going to say I have some choices on here that are very interesting, but I also use this as a way to showcase. So, like, for example, there are a couple of actors on here got nominated for the main acting awards for me, but a couple of them were on here were like, I wouldn't put them in the main acting award, but I saw something kind of cool in them in this movie that I really liked this year. Yeah. It may not be like an awards film, but it is a film that I really enjoyed, and this particular performance really made me go, huh. And it is there is one person on my list in particular who is like middle-aged, but really, I think, blossomed this year with a particular role. So
why don't you go for it?
All right. So for breakthrough, I have Catherine Newton, who played the titular role in one of my favorite movies this past year, Lisa Frankenstein. She was quite fun in that film. I have Paul Mescal, but not for Gladiator 2, which people might think. I actually have him for All of Us Strangers, which Wallys has told me that he was on your radar before.
Paul Mescal actually won this category in my awards a couple years ago for his role in After Sun, the A24 coming-of-age story about a father and daughter who go on vacation in the Caribbean. Yeah. Not Caribbean, the Mediterranean. But that speaks to how personal the breakthrough category is. Because if you don't see the film, it can't be your breakthrough.
Yeah. And to be fair, he's still very new. He had 2 films, I think, before All of Us Strangers.
Yeah.
And 3 before Gladiator 2. So
I would say this last year was his breakthrough to the mainstream.
Yeah.
After Sun was like an independent film that got a lot of play, and it got him a lot of critical notice. But this year he was in the Gladiator sequel, and he's really on the come up as like a figure in blockbuster entertainment.
Oh yeah. And his performance in All of Us Strangers as a very, very just just emotional. I was emotional watching that. He played a gay character too, which was great. I have Katie O'Brien for Love Lies Bleeding. Loved her in that. Here's one of my weird ones. I have David Howard Thornton for Terrifier 3. This man has been in other movies, and he was in the previous 2 Terrifiers. But I would argue his range in this film, they were able to give him a lot more to play with, and he is fun. He's terrifying. I felt every emotion watching this man in this film. So, and then my winner for the year is Justice Smith for I Saw the TV Glow. Just because that was an incredible. And again, Justice Smith has been doing other things. I believe maybe just on television. But this role, and I Saw the TV Glow, was incredible. And definitely, I just followed them through their journey, and they're gonna do good stuff.
Mine, I actually have Justice Smith.
Okay.
In my nominations. In addition to that, I have David Dastmalchian, who, again, he's been around for a long time as a character actor. He was great in the Denis Villeneuve movie Prisoners. But he had his first real lead role this year in a horror film called Late Night with the Devil. If you haven't seen it, check it out. He's great in it. Juliette Gariepi, a character actor from Canada who is in a lead role in the film Red Rooms. Yinka Menelosh in the Romanian film Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World. And my winner for this category is Aaron Pierre, who some people have definitely encountered him before. He's best known, I believe, for TV. But he has a lead role in the action drama film Rebel Ridge on Netflix. Check it out. I hope that he goes on to bigger and better things. He's a great action star. Kind of in a similar mode as some of the 80s action figures. He is, I think, hopefully he can find a niche and greater fame after this film. We're going to have to speed this up a little bit because we're already an hour in.
It's like an award show, Wallace. This one could be an extra good. We could be an hour and a half. Or is there a time limit?
No, there's no time limit. But
the award shows go long anyway. And we were doing the thing that I like when that happens when award shows go long, and that's when you talk about the art of filmmaking.
Yes.
So there could be this is a special episode.
A very special episode of Cinema Double Shot, in which we talk for hours about our favorite films.
No. It's just been an hour, and we're about halfway through the awards, so we're fine.
So the next category is body of work, and I actually started this category in 2014. The 10th year I was doing the Wallys, because another aspect that is not recognized by the Oscars or very many other awards bodies is that, the average actor especially, although this category for myself I open up across the board, cinematographers have gotten it, composers have gotten it, actors of course have gotten it, producers have gotten it. But it recognizes someone for the entire body of their work in a given year. People sometimes aren't recognized for individual achievements, even though they have steadfastly produced good work. It just hasn't, for various reasons, it hasn't been among the quote-unquote best of the year in whatever category. So this year, mine are Anjanou Ellis-Taylor, really wonderful actress who's been in the game for decades, finally getting her flowers. This year, I saw her in 4 different movies. The Deliverance, Exhibiting Forgiveness, Origin, and The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat. That's a mouthful. Luca Guadagnino, who part of this is like the vagaries of the release schedule, but he had 2 feature films released this year, Challengers and Queer, as a director. Margaret Qualley, an actor, younger actor, but she's been in the game for like 5-ish years or so. She was in Drive Away Dolls, Kinds of Kindness, and The Substance. Jeremy Allen White, the very dreamy Jeremy Allen White,
Woof.
who is the lead actor in the TV show The Bear, but also turns in a really sensitive supporting performance in Fremont. I hope that he does more independent films because he was fabulous in Fremont. And my winner is Emma Stone, who has done something wonderful this year. She's an actor. She's still continuing to appear in front of the camera, but she actually has launched her own production company, and she's using her largesse, her esteem in the film world, to make a lot of really wonderful films. A bunch of my favorite films this year were actually produced by Emma Stone's company. Even though she does not appear on screen, she's helping to make them a reality. Those films include A Real Pain, Problemista, and she's continuing to collaborate with the Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos this year on Kinds of Kindness. She also produced I Saw the TV Glow.
She did.
And she produced and was on screen for the really weird but delightful TV show The Curse. It was an incredible year for Emma Stone, and she's helping to take a lot of like lesser known auteurs and elevate their work and bring them to wider American audiences. And I love that.
That is an incredible choice to follow up incredible year. I love that. For mine, these are just people that I admire, that I think this year had a couple of things going for them, and I want to be like, I love these people. And Margaret Qualley is on my list too for the same thing. She's incredible in The Substance, and I liked her in Kinds of Kindness. One of my favorite actors had a very good year this year, Isabella Rossellini. Yes. She had 3 really big movies this year. She had La Chimera, Conclave, and then Problemista. Love her. I have Damien Leone on here, who is the director and special effects person for Terrifier 3. He also did special effects for Stream, and I just appreciate that he is kind of getting back into that practical splatter gore, and is getting it back into the mainstream, which I love. Andrew Scott, I loved him in All of Us Strangers, and he did a miniseries where he played Tom Ripley, and I think he's a very great actor and wanted to give him a shout out here. My winner is somebody who I've admired for a very long time, and her career keeps adding new things. So it's Barbara Crampton, who had 2 major movies this year, which was Suitable Flesh, which I really loved, and a movie that I actually didn't see, but you saw. I saw the last half hour of it, but I appreciate that she is in this film, and that's The Last Stop in Yuma County. But the thing about Barbara Crampton is that she is also now a producer, and she has been producing these independent horror films, again, similar to Emma Stone, but this time she is cranking out movies that showcase the up-and-coming horror talent. And this year she produced and acted, and I think even worked a little bit on the script for Suitable Flesh, which is a lot of fun, which is kind of a spiritual successor to Stuart Gordon's gonzo horror movies from the 80s. So I love Barbara Crampton. I think she's
I love that. And I love that there's a kind of both of our choices are actresses who have stepped behind the camera and are helping to create new films and foster new talent.
Yeah.
Yay. Our next category is ensemble performance. And I've been doing this category since 2010 because I found myself oftentimes I'll watch a movie and there's no one standout performance among the actors, but it is so obvious that the group of performers on set, they're working so in sync that they create something much greater than the sum of their parts. There's a certain kind of comfort and chemistry that can be created among a group of really high functioning actors under the direction of a auteur who has vision, where it can be difficult to single out any one member of the cast for being better than the rest, and yet the movie, like there's just something magical happening among that cast of people. So in those cases, that's kind of how I determine what is a great ensemble performance. This year, among my nominees are All of Us Strangers, the Andrea Arnold film Bird, which has a really fantastic cast, Conclave, featuring Isabella Rossellini, and Fremont, featuring the aforementioned Jeremy Allen White. My winner of this category this year is Challengers. And it's really hard, like the trio of performers that are part of a love triangle at the center of this film, they just work so well together, and you understand immediately, like there's not a false note. You understand these complex relationships and how they intersect, and it's hard to single out any one of these three actors for flowers when all three of them are really good. And that includes Zendaya and Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor. The three of them just work so wonderfully together. Josh?
Excellent. I agree. That is awesome. I really loved them in that film. Anyway. I have some weird ones on here. Some of it reflects just me, obviously. So I have Wicked on here because I'm a theater nerd, and to me that ensemble, like, yes, they were great. The two leads were wonderful, but with a musical, you need all of the different players to work together to just create what you have done, and Wicked does do that beautifully with all of their players. Suitable Flesh is on there, the one that I just mentioned with Barbara Crampton. Heather Graham, Judah Lucas, and Bruce David were pretty much the four main people in that, and they work very well together. One of my weird ones is a movie called Stream, which is absolute trash, but this is a warm bath of a horror film with a whole bunch of old friends if you are like really into like just the horror genre. Everybody, it's like the Expendables. Tim Reed, Jeffrey Combs,
Dee Wallace,
Danielle Harris, Tony Todd, rest in peace, is in this film. It was his last film. Just having a ball and just having fun with each other. Love Lies Bleeding is on that list. Love the just wacky cast of that film.
Shout out to Ed Harris.
Ed Harris is absolutely insane in that movie. My award actually did go to All of Us Strangers because I realize this is not a spoiler because the premise of the film is that Andrew Scott is going back and talking to his dead parents. At the core of that movie, it's a ghost story, and it's a ghost story told by four actors.
Yeah.
And I love it. They're fantastic. They're funny. They're heartbreaking, and there are moments in that movie that are a little spooky too. But it would not have worked without that group of folks in that film. So
I agree.
yeah.
All right, moving on. And a note about these the main quote unquote performance categories. For years, I followed the lead of the Oscars in having gendered Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Supporting Actress categories. A couple years ago, I did away with those four categories, narrowed them down to just two categories with 10 nominations each, no gender distinction between them. And my rationale behind it is great performances come from everyone, every walk of life imaginable. And there were some years when I actually thought there's greater work happening among quote unquote female performers as opposed to male performers. And in those years, I was like, man, I wish I had a sixth nomination for the actresses and four for the actors. And similarly, quite obviously, the way that the current system is, it excludes people who are non-binary.
Yeah.
Where would you put Justice Smith, who identifies as genderqueer, in your list of actors? It's really difficult to do without making assumptions and misgendering that actor. So the combination of the combination of not wanting to kind of pigeonhole people based on gender, which seems like a really arbitrary way to judge something like acting.
Agreed.
And recognizing the complexity of gender, period. I just did away with it, and I created 2 non-gendered leading and supporting performance categories. In addition to, and at this point I had so many other categories, like I added breakthrough performance, I added body of work, I added ensemble performance. There are many ways for me to honor great acting. I don't need 4 categories that are split up arbitrarily. So, and you agreed with me.
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely. But though I don't have 10 people nominated, I have 5 for mine, which will speed this up a little bit.
That'll speed it up a bit, yeah.
But it was very hard for me to just do 5, so I might have to do 10 next year. But I have 5 nominations for each. So.
Well, do you want to give me your 5 supporting and the winner?
Sure, and then if you want to, we can switch off and yeah. So for supporting actor, also, these are again people kind of seen through my lens. I have Kieran Culkin from A Real Pain. Loved every second of his performance. Tilda Swinton in Problemista, who is terrifying. Carol Kane. For In Between the Temples.
Between the Temples.
I keep calling it In Between the Temples.
Between the Temples.
Between the Temples. Love her in that movie. And they gave her such a juicy role to play in that. I do have David Howard Thornton for Terrifier 3 because he is in fact terrifying. And then my last nomination is Catherine Hunter. Sorry, go ahead.
Which we talked about a lot in our last podcast.
For the front room. Yeah,
for the front room.
Because it's just grotesque and I love her. And I realized I read this like the Oscars where I read all of them and didn't save my winner. My winner is Tilda Swinton for Problemista. However, I'm not going to go into the reason yet because I want you to say yours and then we can talk.
Okay. So my 10 for supporting performance are Laurie Babin for Red Rooms, Yura Borisov for Anora, Joan Chen for Didi, Danielle Deadweiler for The Piano Lesson, Carol Kane for Between the Temples,
Yay.
Karen Karagulian for Anora, Bridget Lundy Payne for I Saw the TV Glow, Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice, Tilda Swinton for Problemista, and my winner is Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain because he plays a youngish man in his probably early 30s who is having all sorts of problems and yet is still showing up. And it's about the relationship between these 2 characters. One is a lot more settled. Kieran Culkin plays the less settled character. And, as I've said repeatedly, like, I really saw some of my own friends and relationships in the dynamic between the 2 characters at the heart of A Real Pain. And Kieran just, like, perfectly encapsulates that kind of listless feeling of a certain time and a certain type of person in their like late 20s, early 30s. And I loved that performance. It felt so real. It was nuanced. It was funny. It was sad. And it made me want to call the person that he reminded me of, which I did. and just checked in on him.
I felt that very much. So much, in fact, that Kieran Culkin also almost won mine. But when I saw that we did have a little bit of a confab before this, when I saw that he was going to be your winner, I was like, well, let me give it to somebody else to give them a chance. For similar reasons, but not in a warm bath kind of way. That is why Tilda Swinton won for me. Because similarly, yes, she's very heartbreaking in that movie. She's heartbreaking, but she's also like nightmarish. She is very triggering, I find that character. But she does it so well. I'm pretty sure she's playing somebody with borderline personality disorder because she gets that splitting just well, where it's like, oh, she's in love with you, oh, she hates you. And very similarly, but not in a way that I want to call them and see how they're doing, I feel like everybody in their life has a Tilda Swinton.
And if you can, you run as far away as you can get.
Who is like the toxic person who lulls you in, but then when they lull you in, you realize, oh, I done messed up. And she does a brilliant job with it. And I also just love Tilda. So, yeah, that's why she gets that.
Well, and moving on for lead performance, my nominees include Amy Adams for Night Bitch, Sakura Ando for Monster, Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, Daniel Craig for Queer, Anjanou Ellis-Taylor for Origin, Andre Holland for Exhibiting Forgiveness, Mikey Madison for Anora, Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction, and Koji Yakusho for Perfect Days. And I'm going to hit pause on sharing my winner and let you go through your other nominees.
Sure.
All right. For reasons.
For reasons. So my lead actor nominations, I have Kristen Stewart for Love Lies Bleeding. Fabulous lesbian. Zendaya for Challengers. Freaking brilliant in that movie. David Dastmalchian for Late Night with the Devil. Again, great performance. Justice Smith, who won the breakout role for I Saw the TV Glow. And then Demi Moore for The Substance, because... Yeah, so...
and my winner is also Demi Moore.
It's Demi Moore. Yeah, we're the same.
Yeah.
Hands down, my favorite performance of the entire year. She's so freaking fabulous, and you can tell that this is just her huge middle finger to Hollywood. This is her. Every ounce of her is just... She's tearing up that screen.
Yeah. And I've known for a while that it's no surprise to me that Demi Moore had this in her, because she's been really great in movies her entire career. Unfortunately, as big of a star as she is...
I was touching my mic.
Oh, don't do that.
I'm sorry. Do you want to go back to as big of a star as she is?
Sure.
Sorry.
As big of a star as Demi Moore is, she always kind of poured her heart into these performances. And there are little moments, even in her biggest work, that are just like, you can see the humanity behind these characters. Like when she played G.I. Jane, there are little moments, as imperfect as some of the big blockbusters were, she really brought an empathy to those roles that might not have been there on the page in the script. And then as she got older, and it became much more difficult for her to find good roles, she transitioned into these independent films. One of the ones that stands out in my mind is Margin Call. She is tremendous in the film Margin Call. If you haven't seen it, check it out. She's wonderful in that film. And here, she gets to make a full 4-course meal out of this role. And it is in conversation with Demi Moore as a personality. Yeah. I love that about this film. It presents not the same. It's not the same as Demi Moore in real life in her career, but it rhymes, and you get a real sense. And Demi Moore has talked about this on the interview circuit. Some of this stuff has actually happened to her, and I don't. It's just an explosive performance. I love her in this film.
And heartbreaking too.
Yeah,
Like it is. There's moments in that film where I legitimately wept, which is weird because it's a horror movie, but and it's because of her.
yeah.
Like her performance is what really brings that aspect to it. So, yeah.
Well, we're gonna move along to Best Director. I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh, okay. So I have Rose Glass for Love Lies Bleeding. Chris Nash for In a Violent Nature. I have the Karen siblings, Colin and Cameron, for Late Night with the Devil. Jane Schonenbrunn for I Saw the TV Glow. And then my winner, all right, I'm not going to butcher her name again. I'm not. It's Coralie Fargeat.
Fargeat.
I want to say Fargeat for The Substance. Because, yeah, well, I'll get into this probably a little bit more, spoiler alert, but
It's a great achievement.
Yeah,
it is. It is a towering film.
Yes,
and one that we're going to be talking about for years and years to come.
and it has a very her finger. Well, also we talked about how she had an editing. Like her fingerprints are all over this film.
Yeah,
this is very much she drove this vision of what this of this piece, and it is very, very uniquely her. And that's all I'm going to say because I'll have more to say later.
My Best Director nominees are Sean Baker for Anora. I've loved Sean Baker for years. He's actually, I believe he's been nominated in this category at least 2 other times. He makes these really delightfully entertaining films that are very visceral and put you in the head of the characters, and yet are also deeply empathetic, and I love him for that. He previously won the Best Director award for the Wallys for a film called Tangerine. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Nominated is also Coralie Fargeat. I'm not going to repeat. Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. I loved... Jonathan Glazer doesn't do a lot of feature films. I'm not sure why. He tends to have a decade in between each one. But each time out has been magnificent. And his latest film, which is, it takes place on the fringes of Auschwitz and shows the quotidian life of a Nazi family, of one of the key administrators of Auschwitz. It's not at all subtle, the message he's trying to send. And sometimes subtle is not what's called for. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Also nominated, Jane Schonenbrunn from I Saw the TV Glow. Jane is a transgender woman and has put in this film a lot of those kind of feelings of growing up and the pressures that you feel, not just for transgender kids, but for anyone who's ever felt like an outsider. Yeah. It is, even to me in my own experiences, which are obviously different, felt like a really authentically real depiction of what high school was like for many of us. And my winner is Wim Wenders, the German director of Perfect Days, a film set in Tokyo. Perfect Days, it is really just a beautiful meditative film about the life of a man whose job is to go crisscross Tokyo cleaning public toilets. And if you know anything about the Japanese master filmmaker Yasijiro Ozu, you can immediately see some of the hallmarks of Ozu's work in this film. And to no one's surprise, Wim Wenders is, like me, a devotee to Ozu. He has studied Ozu's work. He even created a documentary about Ozu. He spoke to many of Ozu's collaborators over his many years. And while, this film isn't exactly a homage to Ozu, you can feel the sense that Wim Wenders has immersed himself in the culture. And he collaborated with another Japanese filmmaker on the screenplay for this film. And it is a very specific depiction of life for a lower middle class person in Tokyo, but it's also universal. There are themes and emotions in this film that anyone living in 2024 and 2025 can relate to, and it's just a warm bath film. I love it, and I'm so grateful that Wim Wenders, who his career has kind of ebbed and flowed. I'm grateful that he was able to make this film.
It's a very beautiful film. Sorry, hearing you talk about it, it makes me, I really, 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 you call movies like that a warm bath. And I definitely felt like when we went and saw that film, it was just a warm bath. I was smiling the entire time I watched that film. So.
Yeah.
Are we at the big one now?
Best Picture. Yeah.
Best Picture. Would you like to do the honors and go first, Mr. The Wallys?
I mean, in some ways, much like the real Oscar telecasts, it's kind of because very often Oscar's Best Director also goes, the winner of Best Director often wins for the ultimate Best Picture. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the case in both of our cases, right?
It is. So do we want to just go
it's
through
a little
and
anticlimactic.
have a little quick blurb about why they made it here, but go through and then yeah.
Or do you want to swap? You give one, I'll give one?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay.
So for Snoddys, the Best Picture, my first nomination goes to In a Violent Nature, which was one of my favorite movies this year because it is a slasher movie, but it is such a smart slasher movie. And it looks beautiful, and it has a take. Like, it is not just like, it has a new angle, and I could talk about this movie forever, but I just the tension build up, and it does something so smart with its ending that I love. It is just, it was my favorite horror film this year, I think, with the exception of one more, but we'll...
My first nominee is Sean Baker's Anora, and in this film, his protagonist is a stripper who ends up falling in love with the son of a Russian oligarch, and they end up getting married. The family in Russia does not approve, and hijinks and high emotions erupt from there. It is a beautiful film, oftentimes quite visceral, but also deeply felt on an emotional level. And a film that, is I wouldn't say it's subtle about its critique of capitalism, but again, not every film needs to be subtle. This is a capitalist film. It's a story that can only take place in the economic world that we currently live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked Anora. My second nomination is A Real Pain. Because to me it combines the elements of warm bath, but also just it's a reflective film, So it's the type of bath that you take when you also meditate and think about the people that you love and think about yourself. I'm gonna leave it at that. I very much enjoyed that film, and it just stuck with me several days after seeing it.
Yeah.
And I think the best part about that film is that it doesn't. If you were to ask me at the end of that film, so was that a happy film or a sad film? I would say yes. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's and that's what's beautiful about it, I think.
Yeah. I saw the TV Glow, which I think I've said enough about. I saw the TV Glow. It's a beautiful film. If at this point you don't want to see it, nothing I say is going to convince you.
Yeah. And similarly, my next nomination is I saw the TV Glue, another one of my favorite movies about it. And I think the way that it uses horror elements to, something that I haven't said on this is the way that it uses horror elements to basically bring to life that feeling of isolation and growth, or lack of growth, was just, loved it.
Yeah, the ending is just
heartbreaking.
Oof.
Yeah.
My next nomination is The Substance. Again, I feel like I've said all that I can say about The Substance.
Is that so? Well, similarly, my next nomination is Perfect Days, and I believe. So without further ado, why don't we go to our
Oh, I have one more nomination.
You have a wait? I thought because I start. That's right. Yes.
Because you started.
Yep. All right. So
my last nomination is The Zone of Interest. Again, an absolutely gobsmacking work of film art that feels as relevant today as it would have in 1946.
I haven't seen it, but perhaps I shall. So if I wasn't subtle enough when I was talking about my director, my pick this year and my favorite film of 2024 was The Substance. I love this movie, and I know we say things have been left unsaid. There's one thing that I do want to say about this, and I just take all of this, the cultural issues, having Demi's background, the visual effects, the editing, add on to that I just think it is a brilliant idea to take like a Cronenbergian body horror film and make it about the struggles that women face in our culture. Was a brilliant idea. And it works. And the best horror movies, all of my favorite ones, have some kind of major social commentary, but it doesn't hit you on the head with it. It's always like They Live or even The Thing. Those are two Carpenter films. But I just appreciate that a movie like that is getting so much attention now, because it is valid.
Other movies have tried to do that, but not nearly as successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the ingredients come together in The Substance.
Yeah. It is an effective body horror film. One last thing, I could not stop smiling, which is weird because that movie's not a happy film. But Wallace can attest, as I was sitting in the theater, I just was cheesing the whole time because I was loving every second of that movie and everything that it was trying to do and succeeding to do. So.
And personally, I'm not a big fan of body horror, but that film just won me over. It really did. My best picture, not a surprise at all, is Perfect Days. One thing I'll add to the thought around Perfect Days is, I think we tend to, in our modern world that is dominated by social media, hi, it's us. We tend to get so caught up in our image and image making and how we're perceived in the world, and all of these, we blow we blow things up into these grand operatic conflicts. And this film has a real sense of like, it gradually shows you all of the life events, all the choices that led this man to end up where he is. And it allows him the grace of just being a human being, of being a flawed person who is doing the best he can, sometimes struggling, but ultimately being at peace with where he is and how he got there. And I think that message, we need that now more than ever. We need to be allowing people to be who they are, and not forcing people into boxes, and not saying, well, you didn't achieve this level of success, or you don't fit these preconceived notions, and therefore your life is not valuable. Perfect Days is a really humane film. It deals with some big themes, but it does so in a way that is not at all pretentious. It's a very simple film that deals with big issues, and I identify with it because I love Ozu as much as Wim Wenders does. And I can see so many of those threads from Ozu's best films here. And I am so glad that someone is carrying that torch, that we're still getting these ideas and these messages in 2024 when they are just as relevant.
That's beautiful. I agree.
With all that said, those were the Wallys.
Oh, I guess, and these were the Snoddys.
Yeah. These were some of our favorite films of last year. I hope you go out and see all of them.
Yeah.
And create your own list and let us know in the comments on YouTube what you thought your favorite, what were your best performances of the year? Who were your best director nominees? And you can check out the rest of my nominations.
Where?
On my blog. Check
where?
the description in the podcast episode and on YouTube. And of course, all the usual things apply. Like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, share, all the things. I'm going to give you the last word. Any last thoughts?
No, this is fun. I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna have to do this every year now. This is a new tradition for me. I haven't been doing it since I was a kid. So I thank you for inviting me to do this with you because it was fun.
So to new traditions in 2025, treat each other with kindness.